Today's video is sponsored by Skillshare. Well, it is that time. If you're new here, I'm regularly putting out photo book pickup videos as I'm constantly adding new photo books to the collection. So every once in a while, I will go ahead and just share a few books. That way you guys can get a little bit of a better idea about the book before you buy it. I've got 5 books I've recently picked up, so we're going to take a look at these. I'll tell you about each book itself. Let's get into it. First up is Manifest by Christine Potter. This was published by TBW Books. Created while working in remote areas along the western slope of Colorado between 2012 and 2015, Christine Potter builds on her previous investigations of masculinity and the American soldier, here fixing her gaze on a parallel archetype, the American cowboy. Uncovering a world far more formidable and disorienting than the canon of traditional Western landscape photography had previously detailed, Potter encounters men who sparingly dot the terrain, seemingly both tethered to and in divergence with the myth that precedes them. Manifest does not act as a documentary, but rather as a recoding of the Western myth, the territory, and its men. It is both fantasy and reality. Weaving body and landscape, the book lays open the seduction of the West, the opportunities it promises, the disorientation of altitude, and the confrontation of persistent danger. After picking this book up, I researched more on Christine Potter. I had never seen her work before finding this on Baltimore Photospace's website, but after flipping through it, I went and researched more of her work, and I've found that no matter what project is she's shooting, you see so much of a similar style throughout all of her work, both for personal projects as well as for publications. She has this really interesting way of shooting things that I guess at first glance you don't necessarily know exactly what it is you're looking at or what the subject is. For me at first it was really jarring, and then the more I looked through this book and her other work, I realized there was like a distinct style that she was going for. It sort of has this like camouflage effect, the way things are blending in so much, all being really great black and white images, but there's a really good strong like tonal range there. So sometimes with all of that just kind of sea of gray, things can be a little bit more hidden, and then when you finally do see something that kind of just jumps out at you, I think it adds to like a stronger effect because of that. Definitely a different style and approach to how I would shoot a lot of the same subjects, but that to me is what I love so much about getting different photo books, is just seeing a completely different take on something that otherwise you probably wouldn't have even thought of. Up next, we've got Sleepless in Soho by Joshua K. Jackson, and this was published by Setanta Books. Sleepless in Soho is Joshua K. Jackson's debut monograph. For 3 years, Jackson walked through the lamp-lit and neon-filled streets of Soho, turning to photography initially as a way to escape the frustrations of insomnia. Jackson's work from this period reveals the complex and intense atmosphere in London's best-known entertainment district, observing the juxtaposition between the Soho of today and the faded character of its past. I've been a fan of Joshua Jackson for quite a while now, and I've been waiting for him to put out a book, so the fact that this is finally here, I'm really excited about it. I first found his work through Sean Tucker's YouTube channel. If you don't know Sean's channel, definitely check him out. He's one of my favorite YouTube channels out there, but he's done a couple of videos with Josh, both as he's talking about shooting, and then also he just recently put out a video talking about basically putting this book together, publishing, that sort of thing. Really great videos, so definitely check that out. I'll put a link down below. But there are so many intimate scenes that are in this book, and the fact that it's all happening like in the middle of the night, knowing that and obviously seeing it with the surroundings and all the neon lights and everything, it adds another level to that sense of intimacy. But some of these with a longer lens, it kind of has that voyeur kind of feel to it. I really like it. It's a great book. Definitely check out the video with Sean Tucker as well. It's definitely worth a watch. Before we get to the next one, we're going to take a break, pay some bills, and thank our sponsor today, which is Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for creative and curious people. Explore new skills, deepen existing passions, and get lost in creativity. Skillshare offers membership with meaning. With so much to explore, real projects to create, and the support of fellow creatives, Skillshare empowers you to accomplish real growth. It's curated specifically for learning, meaning there are no ads, and they're always launching new premium classes so you can stay focused and follow wherever your creativity takes you. And it's less than $10 a month with your annual subscription. There are tons of great classes on photography, but one of my favorites is photo editing, cinematic styles, and Adobe Camera Raw. Doing the majority of my editing in Adobe Lightroom, this was a really great class for me to see what Camera Raw actually offers and how I could implement that in my own workflow. The first 1,000 people to use the link in my description will get a free trial of Skillshare's premium membership. So thanks again to Skillshare for sponsoring this video, and now let's get back to it. A Voice Above the Lynn by Robbie Lawrence. This is a book I've been waiting on. I previously talked about Robbie Lawrence in a photo book pickups video when I was talking about his book Blackwater River. This is a book that has a very similar style to it, but it's presented in a completely different way, and it's a totally different subject and story. I can't say enough good things about this book. This, to me, feels like such a unique thing, the way that Blackwater River did, where it just felt like a totally different kind of photo book. Everything from the cover, the way it was presented, the interviews included. This is no exception. It's so unique, so different, and again, his style really carries through there. In 2016, Robbie Lawrence first traveled to a remote stretch of coastline in the west coast of Scotland to Lynn Gardens, which lies at the head of Cove Bay on the west side of Rosneth Peninsula. The gardens had been run for 50 years by Jim Taggart, an avid botanist and gardener. Jim discovered that the region's subtropical climate allowed him to grow plants and flowers from all over the world. His endeavors led to the estate being covered in an intricately plotted web of ferns, bamboos, magnolias. As Jim got older, his son Jamie took over the more physical elements of maintaining the garden, including traveling abroad to research and gather new plants. On one such journey to the northern mountainous region of Vietnam, Jamie disappeared. His body was found years later. He had evidently fallen in one of the mountain's higher passes. A quote from Robbie Lawrence himself states, "When I first met Jim, who by this point was well into his 80s, he told me that he decided to keep the garden going as a memorial to his son. Over the past few years, I went back to visit Jim and document the garden as it passed through the seasons. Despite his age, Jim would bound around the garden, occasionally stopping to provide a lengthy anecdote about a particular fern or tree. Last summer, Jim passed away at the age of 84. In Voice Above the Lynn, Lawrence collaborated with the renowned poet John Burnside, who contributed 4 beautiful new poems to segment its chapters. Reading that description alone made me want to buy the book, but knowing what I knew about Blackwater River, I was immediately intrigued, and just from seeing a few of the photos that were shared online, I knew this was going to be a book that I would love. One of my favorite things about Robbie's work is his ability to actually capture just a specific detail in a photo. And I don't mean detail in terms of image quality, but he really hones in on things that otherwise you wouldn't necessarily want to make some of these small things the subject, but he does it in a way that it just works, and through repetition and doing that through the entire book, you're really getting so much more sense of all of these different scenes. From the photos themselves, the light that he was shooting in, the paper that was used, the poems as well, everything about this book just feels so thoughtful. There's just something so calm and comforting about this book and everything about it. Next up, we've got Tyler Mitchell, I Can Make You Feel Good. Right inside the front cover, there are some words from Tyler Mitchell himself, so I'm going to go ahead and read this first. I often think about what white fun looks like and this notion that black people can't have the same. Growing up with Tumblr, I would often come across images of sensual, young, attractive white models running around, being free and having so much fun, the kind of stuff that Larry Clark and Ryan McGinley would make. I seldom saw the same for black people in images, or at least in the photography I knew. My work comes from a place of wanting to push back against this lack. I feel an urgency to create a body of images where black people are visualized as free, expressive, effortless, and sensitive. I aim to visualize what a black utopia looks like or could look like. People say utopia is never achievable, but I love photography's possibility of allowing me to dream and make that dream become very real. In my work, I use the tools of documentary, reportage, portraiture, fashion photography, art photography, and filmmaking. I view fashion as a space and opportunity to have clothes enhance my message about the black body. I make very little distinction between my commissioned and my personal works, using them both as an opportunity to create this utopian universe. Whether that's photographing Beyonce, Spike Lee, skaters in Cuba, or my very close friends. Documented and real or fictitious and staged, my images are characterized by an interest in purity and intimacy. In them, models recline, embrace each other closely, and peer into the lens, leaving evidence of a public display of affirmation and blackness and a unifying visual text of hope. I also occasionally weave symbols into my portraits, such as water guns and plastic resin chains, symbols of repression, as a subtle reminder of the ways in which the black body is still politicized and sometimes unable to move through the real world as freely as I would like. I Can Make You Feel Good is simply a declaration, and one that I feel is gut-punching in its optimism. It feels important at a time like this to declare such a thing. This has to be one of the most unique books that I have in terms of the way it's laid out and the variety of subject matter. They're all photos of people, but there's so much variety in how he shot all of these. Some have a very fashion style to them, some have this sort of documentary style, but it's all done in such a raw and honest way, even when things are clearly posed or produced. I think speaking to his own experience and his own feeling is how he's able to get that to come across in everything he shoots, not just one particular style. And I think that's so important. I mean, obviously, like he had mentioned, for a time like this, to be able to have that kind of representation and really speaking from the heart and sharing his own sort of point of view and perspective, that's everything. I couldn't make a book like this because I don't have that kind of perspective and it's not my story to tell. For him to see the lack of this kind of work out there and take it upon himself to put that out there into the world for other people to see and sort of see themselves in, that's amazing. Last but not least, we have The White Sky by Mimi Plum. At 13, we wore faded jeans, torn at the knees, tight white t-shirts, long straight hair parted down the middle. We wandered through the suburban landscape, hiding in corners, smoking cigarettes, looking for stuff to do. Throughout my childhood years, growing up beneath the shadow of Mount Diablo in the California suburb of Walnut Creek, I watched the rolling hills and valleys mushroom with tract homes and strip malls, and to me and my teenage friends, they were the blandest, saddest homes in the world. The starkness of the landscape hurt my eyes. The low brown hills coated with dry grass, scratching my ankles, foxtails caught in my socks. I was always looking for a place to hide from the bright white sky. The raw dirt yards and treeless streets, model homes expanding exponentially with imperceptible variation. In her early 20s, the American photographer Mimi Plum looked back to her Californian childhood to make a series of photographs about suburban youth. The resulting photographs collected in her new book The White Sky builds a world in which an unknown trauma hangs heavy in the air and children rule the roost. I first came across Mimi Plum's work when my friend Kevin shared Landfall with me, and that's a book I wish I would have picked up when I had a chance because now the price and value of that book has gone through the roof, so when Stanley Barker first published this, I immediately jumped on it while I had a chance. The way the book sort of introduces the title at the beginning of the book is really interesting because you have a handful of photos and then as you get to it, you see these black pages where it has the title split up amongst all three words and then her name. It has such a cinematic kind of feel to it, like you're seeing the title card in a film. That's just such a rad way to introduce the title of the book. I haven't seen anything like that before. Definitely some of the most interesting juxtapositions that I've seen in a book in a long time. Everything from the people and their surroundings and how they're framed and composed in the photos. Even when things feel off, it feels like everything is exactly where it should be in the frame. It just seems like such a strange place, especially to grow up and you just see these kids being kids. So, those are 5 books that I've recently picked up that I've been enjoying. If you're interested in picking any of these up, I'm going to put links down below to the books themselves. Definitely check out Baltimore Photo Space. My good friend Kyle Miles is running a bookstore if you didn't see the first video where I talked about that. Great place to look for books and find new books that maybe you hadn't heard of and support small business. Kyle's a great guy, a lot of great books there. Definitely check that out. Again, all of the links are going to be down below. So that's it for today. Thank you guys so much for everything. I love you. I'll see you guys next time.